I'm going to tell you the 3 steps to understanding compression, and we're going to get started right now. Hey everybody, my name's Jeff, and welcome to Ignite Music Project, where I help you learn how to write, record, mix, and release amazing sounding music, all from your home or bedroom studio. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and click the subscribe button, and also make sure to click that little bell icon to make sure that you get notified whenever I drop a new video. Now let's get started with compression. Step number 1 to understanding compression is knowing what a compressor does. A compressor is an effect, something that will take an incoming audio signal and will affect it and then send it on its way. And a compressor does exactly what its name would suggest. It compresses an audio file. When you have audio, you always have to be aware of the dynamics of that audio, meaning how loud or how quiet that audio file or audio signal is. And a compressor is a tool that is used to help control those dynamics. Think of it this way. A compressor will take the very loudest part of a sound, the peak of that sound, and it will turn it down. At the exact same time, it will take the quietest sections or quietest portions of a song or a sound, and it will raise them up to bring the loudest parts and the quietest parts closer together, compressing or squeezing that dynamic range closer together, right? Think of it as a smart or automatic volume fader. It will turn down the parts that get too loud, and it'll turn up the parts that are too quiet. And that brings us to step number 2. Why do we need compression? When we're making music and we're mixing music, why do we need compression? Well, one of the most dynamic instruments or most dynamic tracks when you're making a song is the vocal part, right? The lead vocal. Think about a singer. They can sing very quietly or softly, where it almost sounds like a whisper. And they can also be belting a note where they are singing super, super loud, right? Almost screaming notes, super loud. Well, think of your favorite song and think of the lead vocal. That vocal is a very consistent and even volume. Even though it sounds like the singer might be singing very breathy or with a lot of air, very quietly, but in the same song, they might be belting a high note right at the end of a chorus or right at the end of a bridge, right? But it doesn't sound like you need to turn down the volume on your speakers or turn down the volume on your headphones. It sounds very even, and that's why we need compression. Compression helps to even out performances or smooth out performances or tracks in the mix to make sure that everything can be heard at all times. It's a tool that can really benefit and make a big difference in the professional sound of our mixes. I want you to think of another very dynamic instrument to help illustrate this point, and that is the drums, right? Drums are very dynamic, but they're also very transient, meaning that when a drum is hit, there's a very loud sound that happens, but it tails off very quickly, right? It doesn't ring out or have a lot of resonance to that sound. So it's very transient. Let's take a look at a drum part really quickly here. Cool. Nothing super crazy or interesting, a pretty basic drum performance. But I want you to look down here at the bottom at this waveform, right? This is the drum part that I just played for you. Look at the very beginning portion of each of these drum hits on the waveform. It gets very loud, meaning the waveform is bigger or larger, and then it trails off really quickly and becomes small, right? Now I want you to take a look at a drum part that I mixed down that is very heavily compressed. It's maybe too compressed, right, to really use in a song, but it helps to illustrate what a compressor does. Now take a look at the waveform. The transients, or the very loudest peaks of this drum performance, are about the same, but the quieter portions of that drum performance are louder, right? It doesn't tail off or trail off as quickly as the drum performance did before. So let's just take a listen really quick to this overly compressed drum part so you can actually hear what the compressor is doing. Again, way too compressed to be actually useful on its own in a mix, but it just helps to illustrate what a compressor does. To me, to my ears, the overly compressed drum track sounds like it has more sustain, right? It has more room sound, right? You can actually hear the drums in this big room and you can hear the sound almost bouncing off the walls, right? Well, that's because all the quieter portions of this drum recording have been brought up in volume, right? The other thing that it does is it almost sounds like the drums have more weight to them, right? They're a little bit more forceful. They have a little bit more weight. And that's because the tail of the drum hit has been brought up in volume too. So it almost sounds like the snare drum, for instance, has more sustain to it. There's more body to that snare drum now that we've brought up the sustain of that snare drum. Now, there are ways to set the compressors to get a better or a more desired result. And that really brings us to step number 3 in understanding compression. And that is knowing the controls of a compressor, right? Compressors come in all shapes and sizes, but they all basically do the same thing. It's just how it looks and how it accomplishes the compression. I've got 2 compressors here. One on the right is the stock compressor that comes with Logic Pro. And on the left is the Waves R compressor. Now I'm going to use the Waves R compressor to talk about the controls because it's a little bit more simply laid out and it's an easier way to understand what's happening visually. So let's zoom in here on the R compressor. So there are 4 main controls to a compressor. Number 1 is the threshold, and that's over here on the left-hand side. The threshold is what you use to tell the compressor when to start compressing a signal, right? The compressor knows that anything that gets louder than the threshold that you've set, it's going to start compressing. The ratio is displayed in terms of a number to 1, right? So you'll see, a compression ratio of 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 5 to 1. What that means is for every 1 dB above the threshold that your sound gets, it's going to turn down that signal by the first number, right? So if it was a ratio of 2 to 1, for every 1 dB the signal gets over the threshold, it's going to pull that signal down by 2 dB, right? So there's threshold and ratio. The next thing is attack. What that means is how quickly the compressor will start to clamp down and bring down the volume of that track. By adjusting the attack, you can achieve different sounds or you can compress different types of signals. Our 2 examples that we've talked about right now, drums and vocals. Well, those instruments are very different from each other in the way that they make sound, right? Like the drums are a lot more transient than a vocal, but a vocal is more dynamic, right? The range of the dynamics are probably a little bit more for a vocal, and by using the attack, we can help the compressor affect the sound in a more pleasing way to our ears. And the other control that's important to understand is release. You'll see release a lot of times on compression. Some don't have release because the release is automatic, but the release tells the compressor at what point it needs to stop compressing and let the full signal come through again, right? So threshold and ratio, attack, and release. And by understanding each of those 4 controls and how they work, we can learn how to use a compressor and how to get a specific sound. So let's go back to our drum example, and I'm just going to show you what some of these controls do and what they sound like. So as this plays, I'm going to start bringing down the threshold, and you'll see that at a certain point, the gain reduction or the meter that shows how much it's turning down the signal will start to show. So let's go ahead and do that now. So as you can see, the further down I brought the threshold, the more compression was happening, because I'm telling the compressor to start working at a quieter volume level. So the ratio is affecting more of the signal, right? So again, for every 1 dB above this signal, this compressor is going to turn it down by about 2 dB. So by understanding and using and playing with the threshold, the ratio, the attack, and the release, we can get a great sound, a great performance of a drum or a vocal that is controlled, it is balanced, it's even, and it sounds great. So hey guys, that's just a basic overview of understanding compression, and I've got a lot more videos coming in the pipeline that's going to go over specifically how to set a compressor, how to use a compressor, and how to get some really great and interesting results by using compressors in different ways. If you liked the video, give it a like and leave a comment in the comments section below. Let me know what types of things you want to learn how to compress. Again, my name is Jeff. Make great music, guys, and until next time, see ya.